And welcome back. Hour number 2 of this Saturday edition of the Pat Miller Program. Very glad that you're with us. Right over there on the newsmaker chair, there he is, former and future 3rd District Congressman Marlin Stutzman. Marlin, good afternoon to you.
Pat, great to be here this afternoon. Thanks for having me in.
Now, and let me just say one thing. I'm not sure if I've had you on the air, except by phone, since the primary election. I'm glad that you won the nomination, but don't ever make me sit through a vote counting like that ever again, okay? How many people were running for that seat on the Republican side? 112?
Well, there's almost. There's only 8 others besides myself, so it felt like 112.
Yeah. And you know what? But there are some really good people that I've met through the course of that.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the one young gentleman who was, he might have been the youngest among you all.
Grant Booker, yeah.
But, Grant and his family, originally from the Wells County area, and now they live up near Fairmont.
Yeah.
But not Fairmont, Fremont. But terrific. I told him, I took him to lunch the week after the primary, and I said, dude, we have to find you an office to run for.
Yeah.
And I just told him, this is not our subject today, but tell me if I'm wrong. I told him, I'm glad you didn't win it. I said, and he gets, I said, first of all, Marlin was my guy.
Yeah.
I said, but secondly, you and your family is so young.
Yeah.
I don't know that having Dad in D.C., I don't know that's the way that you want to go here. Do something local or at least regional,
yeah.
And get in there and do something, make a name for yourself. And then maybe in about 10 years when Marlin is so old that even with bifocal glasses and a cane, he can't find the steps.
Hey, I've got the bifocals already right here. You see these?
Well, and mine are trifocal.
Okay.
But they're graduated trifocals.
Yeah.
When I first got these filled, because when I read and I've got something, are you paying attention, folks? But when I hold something up close, and I can see it, or like something distant, or like seeing you across the room, I can see that. It's when stuff's in between.
Yes.
The first time I had them, and I was teaching my Sunday school lesson, my lessons then at that point were like this. It was 12-point font.
Yeah.
And I had it on my lectern in my classroom, and I'm sitting there, and while I'm starting to teach and trying to get into it, my head is starting to bob up and down. I'm just trying to get it to come in.
Yeah.
I said I remind myself of the dog in the back window of my great grandfather's Buick Electra back in the 1970s.
Yeah.
He always had one of those dogs in the back window where the head was on a spring and it bounced up and down, and then when you hit the brakes, his eyes would light up.
Yes.
So, the election's coming. The election for sure. Tell me where I'm wrong here. I know you have an opponent from the Democrat side.
Yes.
I'm not real worried. I mean, I don't want to say, we just count the chickens because they're already there.
Right.
But are they even really running a campaign?
Well, we're never going to take anything for granted. And, the Democrats do have a candidate. She's very smart. She's very informed. She's running her campaign. But, we're focusing on our campaign and the issues that are affecting the 3rd District. And, it's been really a positive experience over the past several months since the primary to, talk about the issues that are already affecting us or what's coming at us. I had the chance the past couple of weeks to visit with the US 30 Coalition. We've got to address the traffic demands on US 30 across northern Indiana. We've got the Air Guard base that is kind of compressed there in its location out at the airport, and of course with the railroad tracks running through it. We've got to look at the next move. What's the right move for the future for the Air Guard base at the Fort Wayne Airport? And then the other thing that, Pat, I've been, a little surprised, I guess, knowing that the 3rd District is one of the most heavy manufacturing districts in the country.
Right.
You have the 3rd District here, and then the 2nd District, just to the west of us. You combine our 2 districts, we're the most manufacturing 2 districts side by side in the country. Wisconsin, Janesville area has a lot of manufacturing, but so my interest is the energy component of consumption. We use a lot of energy, and with this Google data facility coming here to Fort Wayne, they use an incredible amount of energy. So those are the 3 things that I've been talking about just recently that we have to deal with to make sure that we have good paying jobs in Northeast Indiana. We've got to make sure that agriculture continues to maintain its strength. there's a beautiful crop out there this year, but also prices are reflecting that, and they're anticipating a big crop across the country, so prices are down.
Has that always meant? I've always got the sense that meant a lot to the people back here, primarily our farmers, in that when you were in Congress before, you weren't just saying the right things, but you live it like they do. When you come home, you came home to a farm just like the farms that they own. Is that not really a heads up? I don't mean just so you can win the election, but that's a heads up so that when things come up or cross your desk or come onto the floor about agriculture, you understand it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love agriculture, grew up on a farm, and then also, now being in business, more focused on business the last 8 years since leaving Congress. We're in manufacturing. Those two industries are huge for the 3rd District, and I think that's where I have a lot to offer, and especially going through COVID and the ups and downs and the challenges of business for both ag and for manufacturing, I have a lot to offer, and in the experiences that I've had the last couple of years, it is tough. People say, why would you want to go back to Congress and, deal with the tough challenges there? People deal with tough challenges every day right here at home. And so, whether it's in Congress or whether it's in the 3rd District here in Indiana, we have to have people that are vigilant, that are don't give up. I'm not giving up on America. And there's days when you wonder, where are we going? But we can't give up. And so it's the same thing in business. Those days when you're trying to figure out how do you make payroll are also good days that teach you how to figure out a way to fix a problem.
Yeah, exactly right. Let's do this. Here in the 3rd District, we've got you running for 3rd District.
Yep.
You move up a notch. You've got Jim Banks, who has done very well with the 3rd District, now moving into the Senate.
Yeah, that's exciting.
He doesn't have the Mitch McConnell money ready to stand against him.
He's going to bring the average age down in the Senate quite a bit.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
McConnell out, Banks in. It's all
a good trade. I like that trade.
We've got Braun going to become the next governor of the state of Indiana. Is it a gimme? No, but I mean, if he plays his cards right, does well, I think it's there. I think in the 3rd District and in the 2nd District, I think we're really holding our own and doing quite well.
We are.
Let's look on up the ladder. Let's go to the president, vice president.
Yeah.
Were we taking too much for granted? If it had been Trump going to stand against Joe Biden, no brainer.
Right.
Does this really cause a big difference with the fact that now it's Kamala Harris and her vice presidential pick? Because I don't think competence-wise it's any different. But just because they're able to change the faces a little bit, the Democrats are more excited about this now than they've been in the last 6 months. Does Trump need to be careful?
Absolutely. Now they have a candidate that can actually walk up the stairs. So they're excited for that. And maybe they'll go back to the long stairs rather than the short
stairs out of the belly of the plane.
Yeah, sure. Exactly. Yeah. But no, we do need to be concerned. I don't know if we had this conversation a long time ago, back when Kamala was kind of coming on the scenes, and she was going to run for president back in, I can't remember what year it was, but I said then, watch out for her. Now, she didn't do well at all, and I was like, well, I was wrong on that one.
Yeah. Dropped out before the Iowa caucuses.
She did.
She didn't have a chance to gain one delegate.
Yeah, and but my reasons were because she's from California.
Right.
She can raise a lot of money in California to push her message across the country in a hurry. Yeah, she's liberal. She checks off all the boxes for the liberal, the Democrat Party. Female.
Yep.
But then she lost, and then all of a sudden she's picked as the vice president, and it's like, wow, she found her way back, through a different route. And of course, there's not even been a vote cast for Kamala as the presidential nominee. The Democrat Party, always attacks the Republican Party for wanting to do away with democracy. We're attacking democracy. They just avoided democracy completely.
Yeah. How do you judge that? I mean, because here you've got them saying you always have to make sure you select your candidates correctly. They didn't select their candidates. There's not one member of the DNC that has cast a vote saying, I want to give my vote to her instead of Biden. That hasn't even happened yet. Yeah. It's going to be done in one blanket fell swoop. Somebody's going to hold up a sign and go, yeah, me too, and boom, that's it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the Democrats, they walked themselves into this spot because back in 2020, if you remember, Bernie Sanders was in the lead through Iowa, through New Hampshire, and the Democrat Party said, we can't have Bernie Sanders running against President Trump at the time. time. And so they went to South Carolina with Representative Clyburn down there, who he basically said Biden's the guy, and got the votes for Biden.
Yeah, he threw the lifeline to Biden.
He did.
And that's where it turned.
Absolutely. And so, now they've got Biden. And the thing is that we should all remember is that while we finally, as Americans, got to see President Biden's physical condition at the debate, especially with Trump this last summer, there are a lot of Democrats and other people on the inside that have known about his physical condition, and were telling us as Americans. And Kamala is guilty first because
should she be held accountable for that?
Absolutely. I mean, she was telling us that he was fine. And she's the vice president.
Yeah, sharpest guy in the room.
Yeah.
Every time we have a meeting, he's the one that's always leading if he's leading the conversation, I'm a Filipino fighter pilot.
Well, they just continue to gaslight us and tell us that he's completely fine. He's the sharpest man in the room. Those sorts of things. But I tell you, I think it's interesting. And my son Peyton here, right beside me, who is with me before he goes off to college. His generation. He's out at Liberty University. He's the president of the TPUSA chapter out there.
Okay.
The increase in their attendance or their applications to join TPUSA have just skyrocketed over the past couple of months.
They're at Lynchburg?
Yeah, they're at Liberty University. And of course, that's a conservative school.
Very.
But I think it shows you that even young people are listening to the conservative message. Organizations like TPUSA, you got Shapiro out there, Ben Shapiro, and all these other great organizations that are really getting the message onto college campuses across the country. And while I'm very optimistic about the election in the fall for President Trump and Senator Vance, we can't take anything for granted because the Democrats will do anything to maintain power. More than anything else, we as Republicans, we as conservatives, we have higher callings. We look to raise our family, do our work. The Democrat Party is solely concerned about being in power more than anything else.
Well, and that's exactly right, too. One of the things that really struck me is that with the Republicans, that they have gone after this presidential election, but it seemed like they had a little bit more vim and vigor and a little more gnarly teeth when it was Biden.
Yeah.
And it's almost like they had to... Part of me thinks maybe this was a good thing, but they've had to step back for about 3 weeks, kind of regroup.
Yeah.
So that way they're not like a guy that jumped off his horse and rode off wildly in all directions. They want to come out with one message, one angle, one territory, and I think that's probably the smart thing to do. Have you seen the J.D. Vance movie, The Hillbilly Elegy? Have you seen that?
Christy and I watched it a couple of Sundays ago.
Yeah, I'm going to warn my listeners, okay?
Yeah.
You need to see it. I told my Sunday school class, you need to see it. Be ready to pull out the earplugs every now and then because it's real hillbilly and there's real language and there's real stuff going on. I'll tell you the thing that struck me, and I may have said some of this to Christy on the phone, but there was so much of that was my family.
Yeah, right. That's right.
What I came out of. I wasn't from a Christian family. I didn't know Christ until after I graduated from high school. So there was so much there. I came away from watching the movie. Kim was encouraged because she's like, oh, man, he's just like us and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I came away from it almost discouraged because I'm like, man, his past is just like mine. Because I'm not sure I'm over mine yet.
Yeah,
it's an ever constant battle.
It's part of who you are.
Yeah,
and I think that's what was so neat about the movie was that all of us could identify in some way. I have family members, that, as I saw the different characters in the movie, I was like, you know what, that's my aunt. Oh, you know what, that's my uncle right there.
Well, his dad was my dad.
Yeah.
His grandma was my grandma Katie. His mom was my mom, imperfect in every respect. But at the same time, I still knew at the base of it all that they loved me.
Yeah, that's right.
I think that's so important to know, especially now for J.D. Vance, that he's coming out of this and going into this campaign as an imperfect candidate.
Right.
But somebody who's being perfected by the grace of God. And I don't want to make it overly religious, but I find great hope and I find great humility in that.
And also the authenticity that I see with J.D. Vance and the authenticity that we see with President Trump. I mean, he is who, what we see, but I had the chance to serve with both, Kamala Harris was in the Senate when I was in Congress, but also I served with Tim Walz on the Veteran Affairs Committee when he was in Congress. Congress.
Yeah.
And Tim will make a very good pitch to the Americans that he's just an everyday American, you know, just like J.D. Vance. But he's a very nice person, but his policies are terrible. It is all about government. It's about government control. What he did, and I think he even went further left after he left Congress and became the governor of Minnesota, and to see how he let the city of Minneapolis burn during the 2020 riots is shameful.
Yeah, almost not even just letting it happen, but practically caused it to happen.
Exactly. It was like almost encouraging. Well, they were encouraging the BLM riots, the rioters, to basically come in and make their point. Well, they burned the city down, and the fact that he let that happen under his watch should tell every one of us as Americans, what would he do if he were the president of the United States? Would he all of a sudden just let, Russia invade? Would he let China invade? What would he do? And I mean, I think that's our answer right there, is that we don't want him as a president or vice president of the United States.
Now, when you're reelected this fall, and you will be reelected this fall, when that happens, you've been out of Congress now for 6 years?
8 years.
Holy cow, time.
I know.
Fun flies when you're doing time. But when you're back in there, you can go back in, and through the Republican rules of Congress, you can pick your eligibility back up and your seniority back up, which is huge.
It is.
Because that way you can walk back into some of the committees that you had a big part of.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions for you. What is it that you're most looking like for you going into the fall and then into your inauguration in January? What is it that Marlin is waiting to do for the people of the 3rd District?
Oh, thanks. That's a great question. I've been talking about that a lot the last couple of weeks, but I do get all my seniority back. I'll be one of the more senior members from Indiana, which will be very helpful for our district. I was on the Financial Services Committee before, which dealt obviously with banks and insurance and retirement, but there's a couple of openings on the Energy and Commerce Committee that I'm working really hard to get on. It'll be that's one of the bigger committees in Congress, and if I have the opportunity to serve there, we can deal with our energy. We've got an energy problem coming to Indiana, which we're not used to that, because we've always been a very low cost energy state, but with the demands going up and with the attack on coal, with the attack on energy policy, it's starting to drive rates up, and so we're not as attractive as we used to be for industry. But so focusing on that, like I mentioned earlier, focusing on infrastructure, US 30 being one of the top priorities for northern Indiana, and then this Air Guard base is a big deal for our community here, to keep that here and to be able to transition from the F-16s to the F-35s eventually.
Right.
And
Won't
so
that be something?
We have to have that infrastructure here to make sure we're in a position to get that to happen here.
So that's a lot of what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Let me go up the ladder.
Yeah.
You don't have the direct pipeline to the Oval Office with a Trump administration. I mean, it's far more open than what's there now. But if you could bend the president's ear, what is it that you would like to be able to let them know? I really think that what the White House needs to do starting in January, what do you want to see them? What things need to be put back in place that got wiped out, and what are some new things that you think they need to tackle?
They got to back off on regulation. I mean, the Biden administration loves regulation. In fact, that's what they count as job creation, which it's not job creation for us here. I mean, we have to hire people to fill out government paperwork. That's but that's not job creation. That's not productive jobs. And so they got to back off on regulatory policy. We got to extend the tax cuts that Trump had passed earlier. That's important because, again, this is, the Democrats like to say, oh, Republicans are just for tax cuts for the rich and for those who, no, it's about keeping money in communities. It's about money staying out of Washington. Every time money goes to Washington, they take the top, 5, 10, 15, 20% off the top of it, and they keep it there.
Yeah.
And so we get less money. One of the other statistics, and I believe it's a number that's even higher than what it used to be, but for every dollar that we as Hoosiers send to Washington, D.C., we only get 88 cents back. I think that now is even lower, and down in the maybe the 70s.
I heard it was 78.
78.
Yep.
So that's the other thing that our delegation needs to do a better job, is making sure that we fight to get back to getting the money back to our state, whether it's in infrastructure, whether it's in military spending, and make sure that we get the benefit from the taxes that we pay to the federal government. The federal government is it's a complete irresponsible entity that handles our money that we send there. But we as a delegation need to make sure that we're getting back our portion that we send there, because otherwise it's going to states like California, it's going to states like Illinois, it's going to states like New York. And we've got to be better at fighting to make sure we get our tax dollars back to Indiana than what we have been.
What is it in your view that... See, here's what I think. And maybe I'm swinging the bat too high here. Maybe I'm swinging for the fences that we can't reach.
That's all right.
I would love to see us absolutely obliterate the federal Department of Education.
Yeah.
It doesn't belong there. It's, if you understand the Constitution, if there are things that are not delineated in the Constitution specifically for the federal government, it's supposed to go back to the states and to the people.
Yep.
Because especially if it's in education,
Yeah.
I can control something far more if it's being done through my state house or state representatives. I can get their ear.
Yeah.
I can bend their ear. Now,
Right.
I have some availability to you, but Congress as a whole, not just anybody can pick up the phone and have a 20-minute conversation with somebody from Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then let's get the stuff that's supposed to be back at the state level. Let's get it back to the state level.
Yeah, I think that we have now $35 trillion of debt. And so in 2010, when I was first elected, the national debt was $13 trillion. We did away with earmarks. We did away, we tried to make reforms. And that was one of the things that, I felt we as Republicans, we were able to cut spending, but it affected the military more than anything else.
Yep.
We didn't make the cuts where they really needed to happen in the entitlement programs and making reforms that are going to somehow turn the ship here. At the end of the day, everything should be on the table. And so when I left, there was $18 trillion of debt. In the last 8 years, they've almost doubled that to $35 trillion. It's unsustainable. So this is going to come to a head at some point. We need to make the reforms now as we can, and I hope the stars align here where we have a President Trump, we have a Republican Senate, and we have a Republican House where we can make those changes. But they need to happen now, or else we're going to have a huge crisis on our hands.
Let's assume for a minute that, in fact, it is Trump and Vance going in at the White House, that it is Braun taking over our state house, that it is Banks taking the Senate seat, that it is you taking the 3rd district seat in Congress. How good, realistically speaking, because not everybody on the left's just going to lay down and fold over or whatever, how good could it be 4 years from now?
Well, it could be much better than what it is today, for sure. And a lot of power has been given to the executive branch from Congress. And that's one of the things that I think Congress has to do is take that power back from the agencies. The Chevron case that came down from the Supreme Court will be a big help to that, but we'll still have to fight, each, regulatory agency that throws out new regulations that cost the economy money. But the biggest hurdle will still be the United States Senate has a 60-vote threshold. And so if there aren't any Democrats that are willing to help reduce the debt, I mean, that's something that it shouldn't be a partisan issue. Why would we agree as both parties that we should just continue to increase the federal debt? I believe that's the biggest threat to our country. China's actually buying our debt, and China plays they can play on their own rules. They play a very different game. They look out for China before anybody else. And I remember, one story, and I probably shared this with you before, but when I was on the budget committee, the Secretary of Defense, Leon Panetta, was the defense secretary, and we were talking about how much money we were spending in Afghanistan. Well, I had visited Afghanistan and was told there that China does nothing in Afghanistan except they come in and buy up mineral rights. They don't spend anything on military. They don't spend on anything of defending that country and trying to make reforms there. They just simply come in and they take. The Chinese are takers rather than freedom fighters. We fight for people's freedom, and we spend billions of dollars, and we spend blood for other people's freedom around the world. And yet China never does that, and they only go in and buy up mineral rights. They go in and they're looking out for the economic prosperity of China, and that's got to stop. We can't continue just to be. that generous. America is a generous nation, but it is coming at our own cost.
Yeah, always has been. We can't continue to function in that way, in that realm, and to that degree.
That's right.
Or we're going to bankrupt ourselves.
That's right.
But we need to get a handle on that. Time's gone here. I can't believe it. I appreciate you stopping in.
You bet.
Making a way for me on the weekend.
Well, I'm glad you got to see my son Peyton. He's off to college next week.
Oh yeah. Let me just say this: if it wasn't for Peyton being with you, this wouldn't be an in-studio interview.
We'd
have done this by phone. Yeah.
I see.
And I'd have spent most of it talking to Peyton.
Yeah.
So,
well, he did drive, so that's partially true, maybe.
Sure.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Always good to see you.
Thanks for popping in here.
Thank you.
Tell the lovely missus we said hi.
I will.
And my best to you from
and
Kim.
Likewise. Thank you.
We'll be back with more straight ahead. This is Pat Miller here on WOWO 92.3 FM and 1190 AM. Hey, welcome back. Our appreciation for Marlin Stutzman being with us here on the Pat Miller program on this Saturday, and we'll have him back several times again before we get to the general election. We're going to keep our eyes peeled. It seems that Donald Trump is saying he's agreeing to one debate coming up with Kamala Harris. He's saying he actually wants to have 3. She seems to be wanting to have one and one only, and she seems to want to do it with teleprompters, and the fear of what she's led herself into is all standing out there, but there you've got it. I thought it was interesting, something that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, and I mentioned this once or twice earlier in the program, that Vice President Harris is picking, in the person of her vice presidential pick that she has, that in picking him, that she is not picking a uniter just for the Democrat Party, but for the entire United States. Okay, if you have a guy whose military record is in question, and it is, if you have that going on, if you have somebody who is claiming things that occurred when he was in combat, and now is it really so much, and it seems like it's less than as advertised, what about what it is that's going on since his time as the governor of his state, where now it's being said by some, including Democrats, that a lot of the problems that are happening in the city of Milwaukee are occurring because of the leadership and the packages and the priorities and the programs of their current governor of the state, Governor Wall. And he is the one who, Governor Harris Walls is the one, Governor Walls, is the one who's the one who now is standing up. And it seems like everybody now is scrambling behind him to try to help us to see who it is they want him to be and not who it is he really is. I get it. I genuinely get it. I get it why sometimes, and this is Republican and Democrat, you don't always want to have the person all the way, all the time, be right up front. And with Tim Walz as the governor of Minnesota, it's painting a picture that maybe is not real positive for him. And so now how do you cover that? How do you hide that? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says, well, he's not just a uniter for Democrats, he's a uniter for everybody. Well, okay, Ocasio-Cortez is going to be fine in her election in New York City, just so you know. 2 other members of the squad, not so much. Jamal Bowman, who, of course, is from Utah, Democrat Utah, and Jamal Bowman has been outed in his own primary out in Utah, and now we found out late this week, Cori Bush from the 1st District of Missouri, just outside of St. Louis, Cori Bush, who has been a strong member of that group, the very powerful group there. Maybe it's not as powerful as we thought or they had hoped. Nobody thought 6 months ago that Jamal Bowman, and certainly not Cori Bush, that they were ever in doubt or had a problem coming. Nobody thought that. Nobody thought that. Well, I bet they're thinking about it now. And a lot of them are sitting there saying, I align myself with Joe Biden. Well, that's why you went down. And now you've got the vice president, who's now the new candidate, wanting to pave her own way. And can she do that? Because it would seem if you align yourself at all with the current president of the United States, it's going to come back and bite you. And that's where she's finding herself now. A little bit more on that. What should Harris and her VP pick? What should they tell us? Well, I've got some thoughts of what they should tell us. I don't think they will, but I'll tell you what I think it is that they should. And we're going to talk about all this as we try to finish up our Saturday together right here on WOWO 92.3 FM and 1190 AM. Hey, welcome back as we continue to inch ourselves toward the top of the hour. Sound like a woolly worm, don't I? I'm not quite inching myself. But as we work ourselves toward the end of this hour here on this Saturday, hope you're having a fabulous weekend. I can't tell you what it means to me that you make us a part of your weekend, whether it's live, you're driving to the lake, you're out on the boat, you're fishing, you're puttering around the house, whatever it is that you're doing, or you listen after the program on our podcast. So remember, you can do that. Just go to wowo.com. That's wowo.com, and all you have to do is find programs, find Pat Miller program, and you'll see each week's podcast. They go up immediately after we broadcast them, and they're there with the most recent week first, and they're in order. Segment 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then hour 2, segment 1, 2, 3, and 4, right there in order. Easy to find, easy to get there, not really a problem. So what is it that we should be hearing? We've heard a lot today of what it is that Kamala wants us to hear, a lot of what it is that Tim Walz wants us to hear or think about him, what Democrats think. What should we hear? What should Vice President Harris, what should her pick tell us in the end about her? Not about the pick, but about her. I think it tells us she's a radical. And I think it tells us that she's a coward. Let me give you my reasoning for that. And the reason is this. Why did she pick Tim Walz? Why didn't she pick the governor of the state of Pennsylvania, Shapiro? Let me make this as easy for you as I can. Is he good with the economy? Yes. Has he been fair to Democrats? Yes. Do they like him in Pennsylvania? Yes. What is there to dislike about him? Are we all ready? He's a Jew. I'm sorry to be blunt about it, but that's it. There is no were he not a Jew, he would be the pick right now, and nobody would be saying anything about the war record of Tim Walz or the liberal record of Tim Walz. This is going to be very difficult for the Harris campaign. I think maybe more difficult than they had thought at the start. But we shall see. But what should the pick tell us? It should tell us that she's a radical, that she is a coward. This pick should tell us that she will, and she will always, when given the right opportunity, she will always side with the most extreme portion of her party. Not say some things for the bulk of her party, and then, let some of the people out there on the far left try to come in and find room for themselves. No, that's not what she's doing. She's always siding with the most extreme in her party, and that she is afraid enough of them that she is willing to engage in the most cynical bigotry in order to curry their favor. Now, is some of that going to change? I think the fact that Cori Bush, they're in St. Louis, losing her primary, and that's a huge shot across the bow. That's a huge shot against the people they're known as the pride group of the people there in Congress that want to stand with her. Those that, in fact, we are the pack. We are the pack. Well, they're not primarily a pride pack, but they're a pack. They back for the pride, LGBTQ, and all the above. But what it is that they want and the curry of the favor that they want to know what it is that they're getting in this VP. That's the kind of person who certainly should not be president of the United States if, in fact, Harris's pick pushes to that end of her own party. There are a lot of Democrats that will be looking at this and who will say to themselves, okay, she's a Democrat, he's a Democrat, we're Democrats. Where's the part of this ticket that speaks to us? That's an answer that Kamala Harris has got to come up with, and she's going to have to come up with it pretty fast. What are we talking about next week? I'll bring it up straight ahead here on WOWO 92.3 FM, 1190 AM. Hey, welcome back. Our last little segment for this weekend. Thanks so much for making us a part of this. Can you believe that summer is almost shot? I mean, we're very closely here, halfway through the month of August, which is just unbelievable to me. But here we are. Let me say again, we celebrated with her this past Wednesday, but happy birthday to my lovely bride that we celebrated on Wednesday. And we had a great time, her and the girls, and we just had a great time and went out and attacked some food on Wednesday night, it's my calling. I do that. It's not even hard. Coming up next week, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what we're going to cover because I want you to be here. Things are not looking very good in England. Why should we care? I think a lot of what's going on in England is going to function as a precursor to what it might be happening here in this country if we're not really careful. One person I was reading the other day said, I haven't been to London since I was a student. What the heck happened? What's happened to you? He said, the very fact that we have to ask that question is an act of racism. And everybody else laughed. The unstated premise of the joke was that everyone knows what happened in England, mass immigration, but no one is allowed to speak about it. I mean, the statistics and the numbers reveal the general trend. One of the offers that I read said, since my last visit nearly 2 decades ago, the white British population of London has declined from 60% to 37%. 37%. So it's almost in half. Meantime, the Muslim population of London has nearly doubled, and migrants from South Asia and from Africa have done themselves all along the way, all throughout the city of London. London, England's capital and largest city, is no longer majority English. Anglos have now been a minority for more than a decade. What I've kind of observed in reading some things there in and around that city has amazed even me. Women's eyes now peer through the slits of their black niqabs. A procession of sub-Saharan Africans traversing Westminster Bridge, waving the flags of their homelands and demanding reparations. Sound familiar? Street corners that could be confused for Islamabad, districts in which one could pass an entire day with barely a glimpse of an Englishman. These are facts. There is nothing inherently racist or anti-racist about them. It's not a question of, are you a racist? It's a question of, are these the facts? And right now, in London, those are the facts. Now, if you're fine with that, if that's how things turn out here, fine. Just be ready for whatever's coming. I mean, the things that we've just read about London, what if that's what we're going to be reading about Indianapolis 20 years from now? Are we ready for that? Are we ready for that? Now, London, England's capital, largest city, no longer majority England, but England, unlike the U.S., is not a land of immigrants. Pat, what are you talking about? The history of mass migration in Britain is a history of civil tension, and it's been punctuated with violence and riots and terrorism and murders and rapes. And the events of the most recent weeks there in England have brought this suppressed conflict to the surface one more time. And they're going to have to come to grips with it. You can only throw your hands over your eyes or wrap a bandana around your head so many times to where you can finally say, okay, this is fine because I don't see a thing. I don't see a thing that's wrong. I don't see a thing, period. That's what they're going to have to come to grips with. So we're going to start off next week talking about that. What's happening to England? Why is England now a hollow kingdom? Which is exactly what it is. Thank you for being with us. Remember, you can email me even after I'm gone, and that's pretty easy. Pat Miller, all one word, no dots or dashes. Pat Miller at wowo.com, and I'll see you next Saturday right here from noon.
Podcasts by Federated Media.